Well, why don't we start with you introducing your name, who you work for, where you're from, and your background.
All right. Well, my full name is a bit difficult for non-native Dutch speakers. It's Anne-Mieke Bovelett. So normally I'm just fine when people call me Anne. I'm half Dutch, half Danish. I grew up in the Netherlands in an artist family, and I now work and live in Germany, not so far from Düsseldorf. I'm self-employed. I have been self-employed since 2008, full-time, part-time since 1998. Regarding to what I do now, I'm an accessibility specialist and avid advocate. Since 1998, I have been creating experiences digitally that whack doors in people's faces. And that was a shocking realization that there was no obvious information on the web that tells you if you build a website, please regard this and this and this. So people who cannot use the web like you can, who need assistive technology or who cannot hear well, who cannot see well, who are colorblind. I mean, it's only 8% of all born male, right? To say it cynically, that's a lot. I didn't know that. And I realized many people didn't know that. And it was a heartbreaking realization for me. And then I quickly dove into the world of accessibility, and I found people with a lot of passion for accessibility. They're all very social, kind people. And if you have to kick in doors in the business world, kind and social is wonderful, but you often get pushed down when you're like that. And in a lot of companies, accessibility people are just appointed single or two people in one big company, whereas the job to make something accessible is really big. And so I decided to not be that auditor, although I could and can, and not go too much into the technical side of things, but to be the person who really kicks down the doors in companies, who sets up things for others so they can do their job, and everybody profits from that. So I train designers, I train content creators, I guide developers, and I bring them together as teams together with their management. So that is actually what I generally do, and I'm up to here in the WordPress community.
I love your passion for accessibility. You're correct in that there's a lot of advocates for it, but many people don't know where to start. They feel overwhelmed with the concept. I know as I've explored on my own sites, I've definitely felt overwhelmed on knowing what to do and what smaller changes I could make to at least get started down that path, which leads me to the next question. Can you share a brief description of your project?
Oh, yeah. So the project for this year is accessible infographics. It's interesting to see that there's so much on the move, especially in e-commerce and in WordPress, for example, WooCommerce. The core has been made fully accessible. I mean, I think they're almost there, like a couple of percentage. But infographics are not part of that core. They're not part of core WordPress. Of course, it's an extra item. And infographics are often misunderstood. You can, for example, there will people create an infographic for technical data about a product that someone wants to buy, and they will have this beautiful graphic making a nice reading journey. And then when you cannot read that for whatever reason, and you rely on a screen reader, for example, that is a black spot for you. Another example are traveling companies or train companies, for example. You so often see these beautiful maps of a province or a country, and then they show you where the train stops. But if someone who cannot see that doesn't hear the information, this person is locked out of that experience, which may be very important. And most important, it's also a lot happening in medical information, and things are being put in infographics. So this year's project is about creating the MVP for a plugin, initially in WordPress, where you can easily create accessible infographics. So anyone can understand these and read these no matter the technology that they use. And we're going to do it in such a way that the documentation around it is sort of like a blueprint. So other open source content management systems can also implement this, because this needs to be done really, really fast. You know, the European Accessibility Act.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit more about that for anyone who may be unfamiliar?
Oh, yeah. So, first of all, there's a lot of scary news going around that, you know, and fear is a very bad advisor. The European Accessibility Act is the result of nobody really doing something about accessibility in general. I mean, that's put really harsh, but that's the reality of things. And before, where governments were obliged to make their digital presentations accessible, now they're going to after private companies. At least that's how a lot of people feel about it. Like, they're going after us. It is mean. We have to invest all this money. Fact is that this is targeted on business to consumer. It's protecting the consumer. And so the European Accessibility Act also has, targets a certain group. So web shops, for example, who have more than 10 employees and 2 million turnover, they have to be accessible. Now, since we're talking about CloudFest, this, for example, also goes for hosting companies. If you are a private person and you can buy a domain name and you can set up an email address there, it has to be accessible. June 28, 2025, this is going to come into effect. And in every country in Europe, the rules are going to be enforced differently, or I should say the consequences. So in some countries you can get fined. The scariest one, and please forget about it, but it's really nice to say in an interview, in Ireland you can go to jail.
Ooh.
All right. But the thing is, and this is the most important thing, is I still say there's no shame in having an inaccessible website, but there is if you know that you have to do it. And there's much more information about this now. People should really inform themselves and be careful of the accessibility cowboys.
Ooh,
because there are a lot of
okay.
people going to come and try and scare you out of your own shirt. But it's about a positive thing, because you will see that if you are not making your web shop accessible, for example, and your competition is going to do a lot better.
And circling back to your project, what are the problems that you aim to solve? What does accessibility look like for infographics? I think about alt text. I mean, I'm sure it's much more than that. Like, what does that look like from a technical perspective?
Well, that's a lot that's up to the developers who are going to work this thing out. So I'm not going to dive too much into technical details, but the result will be that whenever someone watches this infographic with a screen reader, for example, that it is not just in a separate text file, but when they touch upon the image, it is done in such a way that the screen reader will actually announce what is happening there.
And you kind of touched on this next question, but what are the goals and scope of your project?
The goal is to have this available worldwide this year. And the goal is to make sure that people will continue this and join forces with us, and that we're making one or two infographic examples, but we're going to make many, many more, we hope. So the goal is to make sure that this stands by March, when we're through with the hackathon, and that we will also find enough support to get this going for the rest of the time. So everybody who is building a project that uses infographics, no matter if they have to be accessible or not. I mean, I would hope anyone will build an accessible experience, that it's very easy for them to go to the repo in WordPress, for example, and say, okay, let's install this. So it is not a hurdle anymore, because the danger of using third-party plugins, for example, in any website in WordPress is maybe you made everything accessible and you install something and boom, from 0 to inaccessible is what is happening. So the scope for now is we will create a site with information about this. We will set up the plugin. So we're going to need developers with experience in accessibility, people who are really good at connecting front end and back end. We're going to need people who can test for accessibility. We're going to need people who are good at writing documentation, because we're trying to set this up with documentation as the MVP in a way that this can be also inherited by other projects.
And how do you envision the impact on the open web and society in general?
I think the impact would be higher than you think, because right now there is a massive wake-up movement, I would say, or people are waking up about creating accessible websites because the European Accessibility Act is hitting so hard. Whereas, for example, in the US and Canada, there have been laws in place for so much longer. But since this is really hitting on private companies, the awareness for accessibility is growing really fast, and so is the panic. And I think the impact now is that when people see, hey, people get together and they create software to create accessible experience, maybe we can do it too. I think it is something that will motivate people, and it will also take the fear out of the process, because I think that's one of the biggest problems. People don't know what to do, how they should do it. And I think if this is well documented, how we approached it, how we did it, it might bring some hope and more accessible products.
And finally, my favorite question: which award, except for the overall winner, would you like to win with your team on site?
The social media award, definitely. For the simple reason that the more we whack this out on social media, the more people will hear about it. And again, accessibility is going to be into people's focus. So it's not about us, it's about the community and people really getting motivated to do this too and to get into this. And the more people hear about it and spread the word, the better.
I know a guy who might be able to help with the social media side, so it's good to know. Well, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, come join my project if you are part of the hackathon. And what I would like to add, I'm going to be there also during CloudFest. So if people have questions or have questions beforehand, come and approach me. We're already cluttering together with a few people that I know that are going to the hackathon. I have some very talented people in the team, and we are all perfectly capable of answering questions about accessibility, and actually during the entire hackathon, also for the other projects. Come to us and talk to us if you have questions. And there is another great accessibility project happening at the hackathon. Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen it yet, but you're my second interview, so I'm sure I'll hear all about it.
There's another interview I think it's with Nemanja, and he is going to combine accessibility and AI. So yeah, more accessibility love.
Absolutely. Well, Anne, I'll use the easy version of your name. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you in March at the hackathon.
Thank you. I look forward to that.